The Cincinnati Bengals are off on Wednesday, so a great time to dive into questions. And many of you are wondering what the heck is going on with Jamar Chase's extension.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. Shout out to all the everydayers out there who make us their first listen. Appreciate you being a regular here on Locked On Bengals. Today we dive into a mailbag, including what's going on with these extensions for Jamar Chase and Evan McPherson. We'll get to some other topics as well, including some concerns and questions on the defensive side of the ball. Today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel, hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. You can check out today's booster bonus all summer long as well at FanDuel.com to get started. And James, we today have a number of questions, a number of our listeners concerned with Jamar Chase and that extension. And it's like really a handful of questions ranging from, is the team just not ready to pay Jamar Chase the guaranteed money that he wants to get? This comes from Kyle Beverly. They just gave Joe Burrow a ton of guaranteed money. Do they need another year of cash flow to feel comfortable? To Lonnie Weishar, who asks, what the hell is going on? Why isn't Evan McPherson locked up? Why isn't Jamar Chase signed? Get it done, in capital letters. And another one is, will Jamar Chase hold out into the regular season? If he won't, then what's the point of this camp preseason holding? That one from Sincere1513 on Twitter.
Yes, there are a lot of questions, not many answers. I think it's a mixture here, and there's a mixture of things. Like, the Bengals are going to get a ton of blame, but I'm sure part of them is like, okay, well, Justin Jefferson didn't sign a deal before his fourth season and still got paid. Like, why are we rushing? And so I do think that there's some of that, just the precedent of Jefferson. Obviously, I know the reasons why it would be beneficial, and I'm going to get to those in a second for those that are already pulling their hair out. At the same time, the guaranteed money is a very real thing. Now, I don't think it's because the Bengals don't have the cash flow. Let's get that out of there. I mean, they have, there's 18 different gates, 50,000 different sponsors. The cash flow is there. All right. It is. Season ticket wait lists, the broadcast deal, like whatever you want to say, there is money there. Now, do they give out guaranteed money to anyone not named Joe Burrow? I assumed, and still do, that Jamar Chase is the other exception to that rule. The locker room knows that there's two bigger dogs than the rest, even though there are other talented players in that locker room, of course. And one is paid. One wants to get paid. Everyone knows that he wants to get paid. And so I think the entire locker room, to a degree, is watching this, just wondering what's going to happen with Jamar. So there's that. As far as the hold in or out, depending on if he's there now and with the team and goes to Chicago, and maybe we'll get those answers by the time this episode is up. I agree. If he's not willing to sit regular season games, I'm not sure what sitting out in camp does leverage-wise. If he wants a deal to get done, his agent can express that. And if he's not willing to take this to that extent, when it would directly hurt the team and hurt the Bengals as they try to beat the Patriots or try to beat the Chiefs or try to beat the Commanders. And, who knows how long he would do it. But if you're not willing to take it that far, then why do it? And so I do wonder, most players lose the staring contest with the Bengals. I wonder if Jamar really is willing to continue to stare at them into week one. And that's a real question mark with week one, 25 days away.
The other thing is that when you just look at the history of the Cincinnati Bengals and when they tend to get extensions done, it can take a while in the preseason. AJ Green, Joe Burrow, recent examples where things went up to the wire or into the regular season, I think, in one case, but either way, going late into the summer. And that could just be the simple answer here. Looking for Occam's razor, the simplest answer is often the truest. Not saying that's the case here, but it could just be that this is the Bengals doing business as usual And it takes them a while sometimes to get things in line and get through these negotiations.
I will say this just real quick. I thought Joe's contract last year he signed it right before they got on the flight to Cleveland. I think that's a distraction. Avoid that distraction. Not that they would have beat Cleveland. We know there was a lot that went into that 24-3 loss, but definitely wasn't a non-story. It was a huge story as they boarded their flight and headed up north.
Well, I think it's fair to wonder if that's a distraction already for the Cincinnati Bengals, especially given his absence yesterday or Tuesday, depending on when you're listening to this episode. We'll find out if he's with the team in Chicago. We'll find out if there's any developments, probably after we finish recording this episode, almost certainly after we finish recording this episode. But I think fair to wonder if that's already a distraction for the Bengals. They would probably tell you no. They would certainly tell you no before Tuesday's absence, when Zach Taylor was consistently very happy with Jamar Chase's presence at practices. Not as happy as he would be if he were practicing, I'm sure, but was pleased with the way he was interacting. You could see Jamar and Troy Walters and T. Higgins at times on the field working on certain technique things in the middle of the field when, there were special teams drills going on or something. He was actively engaged, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now you have this apparent change that we don't have an explanation for yet. That's why I think we're seeing this hand-wringing, these questions coming from fans. I'm sure my frustration on yesterday's show, for those who have already seen it or listened to it, doesn't help those things. It's just like there is this level of exasperation right now with the team, which is just, you're going to get this done with Jamar Chase or you're a joke, so just get it done. Like, what are we doing? And I think we're feeling that more today as we look at these mailbag questions.
Sure. And part of it is exactly that. Like, we know how they feel about Jamar. Mike told me. I asked him. Mike Brown told me. And I think we played the clip. If not, Google it. It's on social media. It's on YouTube. I tweeted it out too. He said, we're going to bend over backwards to get a deal done. Everyone knows it's Joe Burrow and then Jamar Chase. Like, that's Mike saying it. He talks once a year. And so I think Jamar's logic here is like, okay, well, if that's the case, let's just get this done. And let's get this done with the guaranteed money that, which is probably 65% of the total money, whatever it is probably what he wants, like fully guaranteed. And then the total guarantees would be higher than that, of course, when you get into the Justin Jefferson, you look at it that way. But that's roughly what it is. And that would be, outside of Joe Burrow, unprecedented for the Bengals. And that's what's interesting. And do you have the Evan McPherson question? We could transfer to that because I'm not as worried about Evan. The Jamar one does feel certainly more pressing, even though Evan's going into his final year and Jamar has 2 years left.
We're also seeing the price tag for Evan McPherson potentially rising with the recent kicker deals. But that was Lonnie Weishar's question. I mentioned up at the beginning. Why isn't McPherson locked up? I mean, it's right. Similar precedent or similar tone there, similar idea there. It's another one that we expect them to get done, so they might as well just do it. But to your point, I do think there's less concern over McPherson, and the player himself doesn't seem as concerned as we've discussed previously.
Yeah, he's doing everything. He's like, I don't get done when it gets done. I love it. I love the attitude. And that's why, just to tie them together, that's why, like, Jamar not participating in camp, that doesn't make him better, right? Like, we can all agree. Now, it might not make him that much worse. They may dismiss the reps and all of those things, but it doesn't help him. We know that. So if he's not willing to take it a step further, it's not hurting the team at all by missing camp. It's just hurting him and hurting his potential numbers and hurting his potential performance right now. And so is he willing to pain the team a bit? That's really the question. And that could be really, really uncomfortable. Hopefully not. Hopefully we're talking about an extension in the near future for both guys. I think Evan McPherson's will be easier to get done. I think $6 million per is probably going to get it done. And I'm not sure the guaranteed money is going to be much of an issue either. You give him a year plus guaranteed, and I'm sure it'll be fine.
A year plus? When you say plus, this is the Bengals we're talking about here, Jim.
Yeah, well, it's a year, and then there'll be a roster bonus there or something that they'll add this year. They have the cap space this year.
Right. They have plenty of cap space.
And I do think this too. Like, if you're the Bengals, you're obviously looking like, all right, what do we need for Jamar? And then you have the money Matt conversation. So that might be why Evan's not done. It's because they may want to try to use $15 million of cap space on Jamar this year if they can.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I'm just throwing out a number, but
maybe. And we know that they like to keep some held back for contingencies, and we know that the practice squad isn't yet accounted for. Anyway, coming up next, let's discuss some of these Cincinnati Bengals rookies. We've discussed the extensions that we are expecting to see. How are the rookies doing so far? Let's try to power rank them as a way of saying how are they doing so far. We'll get into that conversation coming up next.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. When your schedule is packed and you have kids' activities and, well, the summer is winding down and you have back to school and football has also started and you work in football, or maybe you're a teacher, or maybe you have a big presentation at work and you're juggling school for your kids, lunches, all of the things that are involved, well, you forget the things that make you happy. And even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it at times, especially when things are hectic. That's where BetterHelp comes in. That's where therapy can help you make time for yourself. And a non-negotiable like therapy is more important than ever when times get hectic. If you've ever thought about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online. It is convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. And I know multiple listeners that have used BetterHelp and multiple friends that have used BetterHelp. And all you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time. So if you're not getting along with the therapist or you're not getting what you need out of those sessions, you can switch and you can find the right therapist for you. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
James, let's dive into what I think will be a pretty fun question here. This comes from Honcho, the Patriarch, Honcho Hude on Twitter. How would you rank the rookies based on their performance so far? I think we can both agree on who's in first place here, but I think this will be a fun little question to talk about.
First place. Are we counted undrafteds? No, I'm just kidding. Amarius Mims is in first place. Agreed?
That's correct. Yes.
I was like, is there any wild card? Could Jake hit me with the wild card? 2 is going to be interesting here.
Yeah.
2 is pretty darn interesting.
I have 2 candidates in mind for 2.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. I'm going to think about it a little bit and make sure I'm not missing anyone. I'm literally going to pull up all 10 Bengals rookie draft picks. We're only doing the draft picks, by the way, just to be clear.
Yeah. Because otherwise we'd be talking about Muma Jongmeta again. I think that it's between Josh Newton and Dejon Anthony here for the second spot. And I lean Newton based on another strong week of practices this week. He had the interception in his first preseason game on a really nice play. But both of those guys are very much in the same tier to me, maybe a little bit ahead there for Josh Newton, which is why I give him the edge there. But both of those guys are rotating in with the ones at times and have been for a couple weeks now in Cincinnati Bengals practices. So you get to the day 3 picks here, and those are the guys that come to mind next for me.
Yeah, I think so. Marius is one. We agree there. I will agree with you as well on 2. It's Josh Newton. It is. He's been impressive. I still think he's more than likely going to be their 4th corner potentially, but certainly someone that is in the mix and has done that. I actually have someone ahead of Dejon Anthony. Eric All. Eric All has been awesome. I mean, has done everything you could have. Like, if you were painting a perfect training camp picture of what could happen for Eric All, when he got cleared, when he joined team drills, when he contributed, when he got in with the first team, all of those things. Now, we need to see him in a preseason game and make some plays. But like, he was a safety net this week before Jake Browning got hurt on Monday for Browning in practice. And Browning had a really good session, by the way. That injury is weird. Just another note. I was reflecting on it. And I talked with Jay Morrison, who tracks all the passes, and said he was like 15 of 17 before on Monday. And at least that's what Browning was. Anyways, like 4 of those went to All. That's my point. And I started thinking about Browning, but I have All 2, and then or 3 rather, and then we can go from there. But I think All has been awesome, and it wouldn't shock me if he contributes this year. It really wouldn't.
Always right there in the next He was actually the next guy for me right after Anthony, just because it hasn't been as long and we haven't seen him in a
Sure.
game to the degree that we saw Dejon Anthony play in a game, and he was pretty good. Anthony was solid in his game action. Eric Hall has, to your point, looked good in practice. He seems to be ahead of where we thought he would be based on Zach
Yep.
Taylor's comments about easing him back in, and he might get a longer workload this week against Chicago. It'll be fun to see him in the joint practices. It'll be fun to see him in the game. But Eric Hall is right there as the next guy. And then it gets a little interesting, I think. And maybe
Mhm.
we diverge here. I have a hard time coming up with who's 5. Jermaine Burton certainly has helped himself, and it could very well be Jermaine Burton next. And by the way, do you have Anthony at 4 if you're going Eric Hall at 3?
Probably just based on playing time and just him getting out there. I think you have to go that route. And then after that, for me, it's pretty obvious. I think.
You think? I have a hard time with this one. I'm between 3 different guys here that I think are all relatively close, but I probably lean Jermaine
Three.
Burton just because of the uptick in his stock recently.
Yeah, I think there's really 2 to me, and it's those 2 picks. It's the 2 day 2s, or the
Oh,
first day
really?
2s. Chris Jenkins and Jermaine Burton. Yeah, Jenkins was good the other night. He just sucked against double teams. Shocker.
I think it was a little bit more than that, but that is the simplification. Yeah.
I mean, and we knew that. Like, I think he's going to be fine, and he's logging a ton of snaps, which puts him ahead of McKinley Jackson, Cedric Johnson, Tanner McLaughlin, and Matt Lee. I mean, as of now, yeah, I would say probably Burton and then Jenkins, but it's probably close because Burton was running with the 3s 4 days ago, and only the 3s. So
Mhm.
he's working his way up too.
I think that's what it is that his stock is up in my mind right now. And so that the clip of Zach Taylor and Jamar Chase on the sideline, we created a monster. Those things kind of suggest that they hold him in higher esteem and kind of bump him up in my estimation. I wasn't really thinking Chris Jenkins yet. I haven't seen a ton that suggests he's going to be the instant playmaker we were hoping he would be, but obviously a lot of time for that to change. I was thinking Cedric Johnson in this territory. I was thinking Matt Lee in this territory because of the way those guys are trending. But the more I think about it, that's probably overestimating or overweighting the recent trends and not giving enough stock to the simple fact that Chris Jenkins was a second round draft pick. And he's going to play a lot for this team, and they need him to take some steps. Not a great start on Saturday, but plenty of time for him to course correct. And we have seen those flashes in training camp. So perhaps I'm overweighting then the recent trends for those 3 players, but Cedric Johnson going in the right direction, Matt Lee going in the right direction. Chris Jenkins obviously making the team though, and those 2 guys are still on the bubble.
For sure. Well, that's 1. 2 is, yeah, they're working their way into rotations this
Right.
week.
Right.
Chris Jenkins has been there. And so that's whether it's because the defensive tackle room is what the defensive tackle room is or not. I mean, that's where I would have it. And, I think Cedric Johnson obviously get a bit more opportunity with Cam's injury, and we'll see. And after that is when it gets really interesting, I guess. I mean, Tanner probably McKinley Jackson is just I'm not gonna add him because it's silly to put him last
It's
because
circumstantial, right? Like maybe
because
he
he's
is
hurt.
last because he's been hurt. And it's
Yeah,
just because he's been hurt. There's nothing he can really do about that.
yeah. So Tanner McLaughlin is next by default, but I think he's really fighting. He's got to show that he's got to force them to keep a 5th tight end because of everything we said about Eric Hall too.
And the other bit there is how many offensive linemen do they keep? Does Amarius Mims' injury force them to keep an extra offensive lineman? Does that push a tight end off the roster that they otherwise might keep? I think that is one of the questions facing them when they get to their cut down to 53 decisions, because I have come up with scenarios where they can keep 5 tight ends. I think we're both expecting them to keep 5 safeties at this point with the way Dejon Anthony has impressed them. And so I think that's all of them. We had Amarius Mims first. You had Eric All third. No, okay. So Amarius Mims first. Did you
Josh
write these
Newton
down?
second.
Josh Newton second. You had Eric
Yep.
All third. I
Yep.
leaned Dejon Anthony there, but I can see your argument for all.
Yep.
And then we went Jermaine Burton after that. right? Chris Jenkins after that.
Mm-hmm.
And then where'd you go after those guys?
Then it was after Chris Jenkins is Matt Lee, Cedric Johnson, Tanner McLaughlin, and McKinley Jackson is not included.
Yeah. Kind of cool. I think Muma John Meta would also be on the list
for sure.
somewhere. I think he's really played himself into roster consideration. Coming up next, there's some other questions about this defense, and some of those center around the interior defensive line. We'll answer those questions to finish the show next.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is the place you need to go right now for odds, props, and everything in between. The NFL season is almost here. And by the way, it's still summer, which means FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. Something for everyone, every day, all summer long, all customers. So maybe you've been with FanDuel for a while, or maybe you're joining right now at FanDuel.com. They have you covered. And I'm looking here, Jake, the most regular season sacks. Right now, TJ Watt is the favorite. Micah Parsons tied for the favorite at plus 500. Then it's Myles Garrett at plus 650. And right after that is Trey Hendrickson plus 850. So maybe you think he's going to lead the NFL in sacks this year. Nick Bosa just behind him. Max Crosby just behind him. Trey Hendrickson's plus 850. So get in on the action today with FanDuel. Take advantage of all of their bonuses. And yes, FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Quickly want to shout out another rookie before we dive into the rest of our questions. Elijah Collins, undrafted rookie running back. Nice game in preseason game 1. Don't think we've mentioned him. Just a quick shout out there. James, there was a question I noticed that you liked. I want to give you an opportunity to ask it before we dive into the rest of these defensive questions.
Oh, look at you throwing me a curveball, thinking I'm not ready. Well, I am, because I responded to this, and I can't wait for your answer because I already know what you're going to say. But that's fine. That's fine. I know what the world's going to say too. I know what all the Locked On listeners are going to say. And so I just want it on record before we actually make this happen, because I think there's a chance. Matthew J. Duffy 22. What's more likely? James catches a pass against Dax Hill, or Jake beats Burrow in a chess match?
I think there are follow-up questions here. Like, is this how many reps do you get against Dax? Would be one question. It's always a question with these pros versus Joes kinds of questions, right? Like, do you get 100 tries? Do you get 10 tries? Do you get 5 tries? Because obviously, the more tries you have, the more likely. Similar question for me playing against Burrow. I do think Joe Burrow's. What's that?
You get 1 game. I get 3 reps against Dax.
Okay. I think Joe Burrow is better than me at chess.
Yes.
But I don't think he's better enough than me at chess that in a 3-rep sample for you against Dax, I would give you the edge there. I think if you had a few more tries, you maybe get 1. But I think in 3 reps, I think he'd get you. I think he would.
Yeah, I think we would both get our asses kicked. People thought that I was going to say I'm going to get open against Dax Hill. No. Chad Johnson, washed up Chad, for sure I would be able to get open against him. But Dax is like awesome. Like, I can't out-quick Dax.
I mean, we saw what Josh Newton did to Chad Johnson a few weeks ago.
And that's right. So like that's why when I saw Chad in February, I told him, you can't guard me. Like, I believe that. I don't think he can guard me. But Dax, like, strength, arm length, speed, quickness, like, he just wins them all. So like, even if I was savvy enough, which I don't expect to be savvier than an NFL active corner, I would lose that battle. Now, if it's a perfectly placed ball and it hits me in the chest, like, is there a chance? Sure. But the quarterback would have to be Joe Burrow. So maybe with the help of Joe. But I also think Joe would beat you in chess. Of the two, you probably have a better chance because it's chess. I don't think I'm going to out physical Dax Hill. Because, like, did you see the clip of T going up top against Dax on Monday? You did. We talked about it. You know how hard it is to do that? Like, T makes it look easy because T's awesome. But, like, that's not happening. So unless I'm like modern day Julian Edelman, I'm not getting open against Dax.
And Dax maybe got that out of T's hands. If it wasn't completely secure going to the ground, who knows? We will never have the official review on that play. I think we agree, though. Like over a big enough sample, maybe you'd have a chance. And I think in a like in a single game, Burrow probably gets me in chess. I think he's better than me, like I said. But I think that with chess, there's always a chance. If I really buckled down and focused, because it's a mental game, I think there's a chance.
I would love to see. This is something I would love to do. I would try, but would I like put money on me? No. But I also like being the underdog too, right? So it's always that's fun. That's why I like the question, because I think the answer is we'd both get whooped. You're more likely to win than I would be, especially 3 reps. If I got 30 reps, well, then I'd be tired too, though. So he probably still has a huge edge. Like, come on, man.
Yeah. Let's get to a couple.
Lifting, I got a shot at some of those lifts. I would have a shot. Go ahead.
Let's get to a couple of these last questions here on the defense that are not about Dax Hill's ability to cover James Rapien.
Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
Big difference. That's a big difference.
A little bit. Let's get to those questions before we wrap up here. Rule the Jungle at Hude Bry wants to know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned should we be about interior defensive line depth? And along those same lines, Jake R.J. Robity on Twitter wants to know the worst thing that could happen if the Bengals gave T.R. Tart a 1-year contract.
The worst thing that happens is they use that Jackson Carman $1.6 million cap hit on T.R. Tart. I mean, that's really it, right? I mean, I don't really know if there's a worst. The worst thing is he's not that good and is a distraction and is a bad example for McKinley Jackson. That's like the ultimate worst thing, where it just doesn't work out and he's a bad example and you're taking snaps away from McKinley when he does get back. But you don't want him to be the distraction and the character issue like that. That's why they're probably not going to sign him. I saw that he's on a visit to Los Angeles somewhere. So I assume it'll get done.
The other one is, how concerned should we be about interior defensive line depth on a scale of 1 to 10? I'm over a 5 here. I'm not sure how close I am to 10 because I'm not sure how important it is to the team. Like if Joe Burrow is a 10 in terms of importance, your interior defensive line depth is certainly much less than that, right? So that by default takes me off of the top level of concern because I think they can win without the interior defensive line depth being great. That being said, it could be a significant thorn in their side, thinking, you're late in the game and you need to put 3 interior defensive linemen on the field to get a run stop on a 3rd and 4 or something, and you need to get the ball back. In that scenario, well, suddenly it is a 10 because it's potentially the most important thing to get you another offensive series to get back into the game. But overall, how often are you in that scenario? How much of the time does your offense get you ahead? How much is this team living and dying with the offense instead of the defense and trying to get out to leads so they put it on the pass rush and the pass defense instead of the run defense? That kind of brings that level down. So I'm probably at a 7 in terms of overall context of the team. Like, I'm worried about it. I don't think it's good. I would like them to get better there, but I'm also just not sure how important it is in the grand picture or in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. And that might be where the Bengals are. Like, hey, by the time it's really going to matter and we need it and got to have it, we're going to have one of these guys ready to go for December football. And maybe they're confident in Travis Bell. Maybe. I mean, maybe they have some belief there. I could certainly see them believing in McKinley Jackson for obvious reasons. He was the 97th overall pick? Yeah, 97th overall pick. So they took him there. Hopefully he's back before week 1, which I still think has a chance. Like, it still got 25 days. He's a young guy.
It's a good number, 97, in Bengals history at defensive tackle to be the 97th pick. Referring to Geno Atkins, of course. Last question here, real quick. Malachi Hayes wants to know, will Dax Hill be a Swiss Army knife for the Bengals defense this season? Will he be used in multiple packages, or is his role set, James? Is he an outside corner at this point, and that's going to be his role?
Just real quick, Jake was referring to Geno Atkins' jersey number.
Yes, not his draft.
Not where he was drafted. Just, I'm getting ahead of the comments. Getting ahead of the comments. What was the question? Who was it about?
Hill, outside corner, safety.
Yeah.
Any flex in his position at this point?
That's right. Outside of shutting me down, I think that Dax Hill, they love him at outside corner right now. I really do. I think that they're confident in him. And you see that Duke Tobin quote that Dan Horde had? I think the front office. You did not. Oh, hold on. I'll pull it up. We'll do this on the fly here. Dan Horde tweeted this out. I wrote about it and I have not published it yet. Where are we at? Here it is. All right. Here we go. This is what happens when we go off the cuff here. You can see that he's really starting to get comfortable out there. He's showing us the traits that he can be an outstanding corner in this league. So it's pretty awesome for Duke to say that in the middle of training camp. And I think the front office has been bullish on Dax Hill from day one. And the coaching staff has tried to figure out the best way to utilize him. Lou Anarumo is a big cornerback guy. I think was hopeful coming into camp that Dax was going to excel here and knew that there were going to be some bumps early where he gave up plays and was adjusting. And I'm sure that's going to happen on Thursday in Chicago as well, in Saturday in Chicago if he plays some. But and I would expect him to. But overall, I think Dax Hill's coming along quite nicely, and I think he's going to be an outside corner. Now, could that change mid-year? Could that change with injuries? Could that change? Absolutely. But I think as of today, the plan is to keep him at outside corner.
Yeah, I think that does seem to be the most likely thing to me, especially with Josh Newton getting work in multiple corner spots. He's working this slot. His pick came out of the slot in that first preseason game. So if Newton is your backup slot guy, if that's the way that shakes out, and then you have Dax to be either a starting or backup corner, I think maybe like break glass in case of emergency for some positional flex there, but I think he's in line for a corner job as well at this point, working with the ones this week at outside corner, continuing to try to build on that pretty strong week one preseason performance.
What's so funny is last week everyone would have said Turner, right?
Oh yeah,
and
games change things. We tried to tell people.
No doubt things change and they can continue to change. And it's if you're DJ Turner, you're still right in it. Go out there and make plays, and you're going to be right there. And that's what I want to see. I hope they push each other.
That is the nature of the preseason. Things just stay changing constantly. The Bengals are back at practice. They have their joint practice with the Chicago Bears coming up, and then a game after that. We'll have you covered for those things. We'll also have your Sunday show after the Saturday game, just like last week, if you're thinking into the future for our Locked On Bengals programming schedule. And until next time, when we get you those observations from the joint practice, thanks for making Locked On Bengals your first listen. You can check out Locked On Fantasy Football for your second. And until next time, Hoo day, and have a good one.